All right, do you got to catch me up? I don't know. I didn't get a chance to listen to the show, so I don't know what I missed. So you did two without me. Like I was like, you know what?
I think I just did the one without you actually.
Oh, I thought you did
Didn't I?
too.
Well, I was gonna try and do two, and then the we had a lot of just extended family uh struggles. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Do I want to know about these? I don't want to know about these.
Oh, it's all health stuff.
Oh, is your people
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, well, my father-in-law's or my I guess my stepdad is he's just getting old. He's got dementia and it took a turn for the
Uh,
worse. So
oh, I'm sorry.
just yeah, taking care of trying to help take care of my mom while she takes care of her husband. So
You know, man, I'm at this weird place where so my mom, she's getting older too. And I know I'm supposed to be taking care of her, but I'm trying to figure out how to take care of them when they don't want to be taken care of. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
um that's a challenge. And it's one that I didn't think would be like that complicated. I just like okay, you're getting old and it's like you have a son and you have kids and well, they're just gonna take care of you, right? And that's just gonna be that way. But it's super complicated.
it is. Yeah, yeah, and
And I'm yeah.
yeah. It's and I think what's hard too is one of the things that you're caring for is how depending on the situation is their ability to be independent.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it, and so
Yeah.
that comes in, especially when things like dementia are involved. That's one of the difficult questions that's always there is at what point do you go with the the care beyond what you can just offer as a family,
Yep.
and
Yep.
because the freedom goes away at
Right.
that point. And so it's just as tough. It's just always tough, and you always gotta um you just gotta be, I think, attentive is the thing. You just gotta be paying attention where things at where things at today versus this time last week, where and it's hard. And you got a whole bunch of people that all want to help, that all have a right to help, that as the
Mm.
kids. And so keeping everybody, you know, involved as much as you can. And it's it's hard. It's no it's no joke.
No, I think the freedom thing, I'm realizing that that's probably the hardest thing to give up. Like my mom,
Hmm.
she just had her third stroke. Like that's a serious deal. And so she doesn't have operation of the left side of her body. I think she's got some operation now of her left leg, but her left hand she can't really function and move. And and so there is just certain things she can't do anymore. And I think the idea of coming to live with me gives her the EBGBs about there goes all my freedom, right? And so, and there's something else too. I think that whatever's happened in the last, oh, 50 years, maybe more, with social programs and the so much help coming from the government, she doesn't have to need me, right?
Right.
She doesn't, and this is something that I've noticed even with the wealth, and we don't pay attention to it until it. But there's welfare in more than just one way. We think of welfare, oh, single mom, she's got 3 kids and she's on the dole or whatever, or her family is just no, no, no. There's all sorts of different types of welfare out here that we don't acknowledge, and we've really made a big system of elderly welfare because with the elderly, we can treat them just like the abortion in one sense. We can push them off. We don't really have to see them. We don't have to really pay attention and give them some comfortable place to go die from, right? And
Right.
then they can just wrap it up all to us and then send us their remains somewhere. It's like it's this weird. The way we treat them is lost its humanity. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And
And
there's not the they there isn't euthanasia yet,
yeah,
technically, but
right.
there is social euthanasia.
The seed of it is planted.
Yeah. Well, and
Right.
the I mean, Paul makes such a big deal out of making sure that the widows are in church, that the older
Mm,
women, that the grandmothers have a place, even if there's no family, if their family hasn't been able to be there, because their wisdom is necessary. Right? The
mm.
church needs them. They need the church, but really the church needs them. That's the social euthanasia that we've accomplished by pushing the old folks off into their own space. Uh, is that you don't have the wisdom, you don't have, I remember sitting with my um grandma, uh, making coffee, and I was grinding the coffee, and she was sitting at our table for, I can't remember if it was Thanksgiving or a Christmas dinner, but I was making coffee, and she said, "You know what's funny?" So this would have been 2005, maybe something like that. 2000. She said, "You know what's funny is you guys pay extra for coffee you can grind yourself." And she said, "I remember when we used to pay extra for coffee that came ground already." Right. And
Right.
she said, "Things go in cycles and it's all marketing."
Mm.
She said, "You know what's coming back? Instant coffee, because that's what came next for us." And she was absolutely right. The next thing you know, there were those little
The K
tubes of
cups.
instant coffee that you could make one cup at a
Yeah.
time, and the instant coffee came back, and she said, "And then it'll be some sort of pre-ground coffee." And the Keurig came right after. And I remember watching my grandma, she's like a prophetess,
Just calling it
but
out.
she just but she just was paying attention. And I thought, how many times, the fact that we're 2 states over from grandma, how many times did I miss out on this wisdom and this knowledge? And so we sat down and we recorded her telling her life story, and everything that we could to make sure that we captured as much of the wisdom as possible, because this is that realization that that is that's what's destroyed, what's lost by the mobility of society. And there are other things that are gained, right? It's not like a but the generation gap has been really destructive. It's created a lot of foolishness that was unnecessary.
And it keeps expanding, right? So, and there's this, I don't know, this concept of what freedom is that is tricking us,
Hmm.
right? So in the pro-life movement, the idea of freedom is being able to kill your kids, right? Like it's the woman's choice. She needs to be able to have that freedom to make her own life decisions, right? I think for the elderly, the things that's separating them from the youth is you're going to lose your freedom. Same
Yeah.
thing. If you go live with your kids, if you move in with your children, then you're at their whim. You leave when they want to leave, you do what they want to do, and now you don't have your freedoms anymore. And so then it's like, well, I want to keep my freedom. And don't get me wrong, I do understand that you're still an adult. Like I'm not trying to make my parents a child or anything. But when they have lost certain mobility, they need to have certain helps that are there for them.
Yeah.
And I think that because of the government offering, like for instance, they offer this metro mobility in Minneapolis, where okay, you don't have to worry about anybody coming to get you anymore. We will come and pick you up, drop you off, take you wherever you need to go, and it's covered under your Medicaid, Medicare, whatever that is, right? We got you. And metro mobility is actually a really good thing. Could you think about parents who don't have the vehicles, who have a child that might have some sort of um, autistic setup or whatever, they can't in a wheelchair. And so it's great to use, but then it gets used as a replacement for the family.
Yeah.
And so now, well, I don't really need you anymore. Um, and so there's all these things that a family would provide for their parents, for um, their relatives. The government starts supplementing all those things, and they become more united to the government's idea of thinking about the world rather than the local concept of mom's here, she's with her grandchildren, she'll die with us in our house. not in a house by you're right. She'll be here with us. My kids get the honor of looking after her, serving her, loving her, and the challenges that come along with that. And we look at these things of like, oh my goodness, these weights. This is such a challenge. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? As if like throughout human history, we've never gone through.
Right.
like, oh, we've never figured out how to care for our parents. Oh, what have we done? And in this knowledge and this wisdom of thinking and understanding the world, all the way up to 80 years old, and not having that imparted into your kids from their grandmother. There's
It's and I do think we often make the decision based on economic reasons.
yeah, that's exactly what I mean by all of the
Yeah.
metro mobility stuff.
Right. Where we think, well, it's if I have to take care of them, I have to pay for it. And
Mhm.
we were just talking, at Thanksgiving about how um that you've had this transition in the boomer generation. You had the transition from a one income to a two income economy,
Yeah.
but they were the ones that were able to have two incomes in a one income economy, right? And so there's a lot of cash that they were able to pull a lot of cash from that economy, which was a blessing, but it left the next generation in a two income economy, with the cash availability much lower. So it's much harder to pull cash from this economy because the cost of everything is so much higher. When it used to be illegal to have longer than a 1 year mortgage, right? And then they switched it, I think around when they were coming home from World War II, they switched it to a 7-year mortgage. And all that it did was cause the cost of houses to go up sevenfold, right? It didn't get more people into houses. It caused the cost of houses to go up sevenfold. It did get it got the down payment down, which gets more people into houses, I guess. But now we have 30-year mortgages, and all that did is quadruple the price of houses again. So that cycle is happening, and each time that we give in to the short-term economic gain, we lose our children really lose economic gain in the long term. And because of that, we're now in a generation that is living very much more hand to mouth than previous generations, but at a higher standard of living. Right.
Do you
So
I
we've
guess
got a
what
higher standard of living. So we don't know how to lower our standard of living in order to save money.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a skill we don't have.
Right.
Generationally speaking, some people do, but for the most part, as a generation, we don't have the skill to lower the standard of living down to something that makes it possible to save. And so we don't prep. But like my wife and I were able to put all of our kids through school on a single income. And so we look back and think, well, we did make enough money. It never felt like it. It was never seemed like it, but we did
Right.
make enough. I mean, there were times we got behind on payments and had to catch up and all sorts of things. But it's over the long haul, we did make enough. And I think that's because God is the provider. And when we make the decision to do the thing that he calls us to do, he's always going to provide. And I think when it comes to taking care of parents, it doesn't look like it's going to work out on paper. But we forget that
Right.
when we do the thing that God calls us to do, that he's going to provide the means for it.
But does anything you ever do for God look like it works out on paper? Hey, I'm gonna get you out of Egypt. Well, let me run those numbers real quick.
Yeah.
We don't have any chariots. We don't have any soldiers. We don't have anything but a bunch of slaves. So
Right.
tell me how you're going to do this again, right?
Right.
Well, I'm going to save you from Pharaoh's chariots, and we're going to cross this Red Sea. Well, sir, I'm sorry. We don't have time to build a bridge. They right there.
Right.
It never works. And that's, that's the hard part about it is like, okay, if you're trying to work it out on paper, If you're trying to work it out on paper, it just never works. It just never works. Okay, so you gotta catch me. Were you gonna say something? I didn't want to interrupt you.
Well, no, just that I was just thinking about the number of places in my life right now where we're against the Red Sea. That's
Yeah,
what's good encouragement. Like, oh
mm,
yeah, we're
yeah,
right up
that's
against it.
yeah, a rock and a hard place. All right, so you gotta catch me up. What did you talk about last week? Because you said you only did one. I thought you did 2 weeks because I was out for 2 weeks.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure I only got to one. So, um, what I talked about was um, let me just get the name of it really quick so I can remind myself.
You've
Uh,
gotten so comfortable doing this, you don't even need me anymore.
well, here's the thing: is it was much shorter, but I don't know if I stayed on topic. So I talked about the shape of resurrection,
Oh,
and just the pattern that you see throughout the Bible of
oh, death and
um,
resurrection, kind of
death
just
and
that.
resurrection. That it's not just something that happens with Jesus, but it's that when you learn to read the Bible literally, um, learn to read it as literature, that there's a literary death and resurrection theme that happens over and over and over that we often miss because when we say we do word studies. So let's talk about resurrection in the Old Testament. We do a word study about resurrection. But if we read, we can see that there's a literary pattern or a storytelling pattern, a callback pattern to death and resurrection all throughout the Bible. And then once you see that, um, then see it fulfilled in Christ, then you can start to see it in your own life as well. The way God draws us to resurrection through death over and over in our sanctification, in our family life, in our economic life. The 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 times that Aaron and I have gotten way behind financially because of car wrecks and uh, the hospital visits and huge
Yeah,
hospital bills, and then the way God has pulled us out of that and raised us. Those are ways that He has transformed us and our family, and uh, given us wisdom, or I guess faith really is probably the bigger one,
do those
the
two things?
hope-filled faith.
Those two things aren't separate, and that's something that you
They're
taught
not
me.
Yeah, they're not separate, but they're different ways of actually looking at what's going on.
Well, I remember when we first started talking a couple years ago about this. I called you and I was like, Jason, man, I need wisdom. And you were like, well, get ready to die. I was like, what? And you were like, you don't gain wisdom apart from death and resurrection. All wisdom is a form of dying and rising, right? And I remember like I almost started crying on the phone with you, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to hear that. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I
Oh, yeah.
remember I remember that. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to. No, I don't want to hear that because I when you're going to face death, there is a part of you that knows it, and you don't want to go through it.
Right.
And you have those garden moments like Jesus, except you don't come out on the other side usually. You don't come out, but like, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, the
Right.
Holy Spirit usually beats you, knocks you out, and drags you into this one. You're
Yeah.
like, what happened? And it's like, I just killed you and raised you back to life. Like, oh, well, thank you, Lord.
So when you hear the lead pipe, the Holy Spirit is dragging your way. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, Lord, I know I need this. Here it comes.
But you don't, yeah, you don't think, oh, this is going to be great. I mean, there is no, there is no rejoicing in that. And it seems like in some sense there should be, right? Like
Right.
there should be some like, oh, God's about to give me some wisdom. Do it, Lord. Do what you got to
Right.
do. You know.
And that's I think I mean that was something that Aaron and I have talked about this a lot. When we were young, before we were married, even when we were just friends and in the same Bible study, and uh one of the things that why we were uh fast friends when we first met was that we both had that, whatever you need to do, Lord, do it to make me holy.
Mm,
Whatever you need to do, Lord, do it to make me wise. That attitude. And when we met, and I'd not really met other people that had that attitude, but that,
right.
and so I was like, this girl's amazing. But my uncle, the Bible study that we were in together before we got engaged, my uncle was the pastor, and he said, when you're young, pray a lot that God will give you wisdom throughout your life, because you don't know the process yet, and so you can pray wholeheartedly. When you get
Mm,
older, it gets harder to pray when you understand the process of gaining wisdom. So
yeah.
you want to keep praying it throughout your life, but when you're young, ask for wisdom, because the process is painful. Um, and so he's the one. I was, I don't know, 19 at the time, and he's maybe 20, and he's the one that taught me that all wisdom is resurrection wisdom. And we prayed that a lot when we first got married. Asked for wisdom constantly. Lord, whatever it takes, we want wisdom. Whatever it takes, we want our marriage to reflect you. Whatever it takes. And and the number of times we've said, yeah, he answered the whatever it takes part.
You're right. Right.
Apparently those roots were deep, and so he needed the long, sharp shovel. But he digs those wells of joy with the same shovel.
Mm,
So if he's going to dig out the roots of deep-seated sin, of long-term generational habits, all of that, it's the same shovel that he uses to dig the wells of joy. So you really get, it's the only way to either of those things is the long, sharp shovel of the Holy Spirit.
I was oh, what was it? It was something James Jordan has said about. Oh yeah, he said, if you ask God for wisdom, always expect a baby to be split in half. Like that comes after asking for wisdom, right? Like there's always a baby splitting coming when you ask God for wisdom. It's like, okay, yeah, that's what happened to Solomon, right? He's like, you asked for
It
God for
is.
wisdom, but the thing though is that Solomon knew that he has some crazy folks to deal with.
Right.
Right. He's like, Lord, these your people. I'm gonna need to deal with them. If you want me to deal with them, I'm gonna need wisdom to deal righteously and justly with your people. And the thing that happens to him right after that is two women come to him with a baby and they both claim it's theirs and one's stolen. It's like, you got to fix that problem. It's not like, oh, you guys go figure it out. That's not, you can't.
Yeah.
This is why
You
with
can't.
parenting, I think parenting is like, when you look at all of our current problems right now, all of them come back to parenting. Every single last one. You can tell that some people in politics, in the culture, in business had the kind of parents that just said, y'all just leave me alone. Get over there and figure it out. I don't really care. You can tell. Like that's exactly the kind of parents they had. And so then they're going to figure out how to manipulate, how to connive, how to not have to deal with their brother honestly in order to get from them what they want, because their parents didn't care about justice. And it shows. It shows in every way. And so if we can, I've tried in everything that happens with my kids, small, big, large, to really deal with every small problem as a form of conflict resolution in the moment. How do we solve the problem justly? Whatever it is. She took my this. Okay. Like, was it yours? Can we identify it's yours? Do we have any witnesses? What did you say? Let's get the whole story out. And so I find myself taking a lot of time working through very childish problems. And you know what happens? Almost every time I get done with that and I get on social media, I see the exact same thing. Like nothing has changed. And it's like, oh, the wisdom that I need to operate in culture and society and politics and rhetoric and all that stuff is right there in a daily form in my home and raising my children, discipling them to love the Lord. Nothing changes, right? Nothing changes as the problems that present themselves, they have more drastic consequences. But the way I'm able to deal with these things at a very young age, and then by the time my kids, we get to a certain age, we get into some double digits, they start becoming little forms of justice themselves, right? They're like, okay, this is not right. We need to solve this problem. Somebody needs to confront this. Like when my wife and I leave and we'll go somewhere for the whole day, lunch and dinner, we'll come back and they'll have little courts that they've had where the oldest are judges and they have witnesses and they're presenting and they come back and say, hey, mom and dad, we had a little problem. This went down. So we had a court about it. So-and-so was wrong. So they apologized. And so everything's made right. We just want you to know. And I'm just like, all that work, all that laboring in the early parts of this has created a certain culture of justice in the home. And so now I'm like, well, how do you produce that outside of the house as well? Right. So not to take anything that's so small and just be like, oh, whatever, get over it. I don't really care about it. And say, how do we have conflict resolution in a biblical way that presents to everybody else, to the world and to the people, to the victim, how God sees justice being worked out righteously. Right. And so anyway, I don't even know how I got into all of that. I don't remember what we were talking about. Wisdom. Oh, that's right. Wisdom. And so anyway, man, those things, every problem I'm seeing right now is when have you been paying attention to like Spankgate at all that happened?
A little bit. It's been a really busy few weeks, so I haven't followed it. I heard that something was happening, but
okay, man, let me tell you. So, there's an old clip that somebody fished up of Nancy Wilson telling that she spanked her daughter because when she came to the house to pick her up, I think it was it Rachel, or I think Rachel Becker, one of them, was like, oh man. And she's like, oh, hey, wrong heart here. Like, mom's here. It's not the way we act. So she just disciplined her, say, hey, when mom comes to pick you up, joyful attitude, joyful heart, and so on and so forth. Anyway, this clip went absolutely bonkers. I think it was like 3 million views. People are talking about it everywhere. It's just all over the place. And I said, so growing up in the culture that I grew up in, I didn't know how far spanking has diminished in culture.
Okay.
I just assumed that, yeah, duh. Like, you know what I mean? Like in black culture, it's not even a question. Like, you listen to black comedians, the spankings, some of them were beatings, were just part of the common form of disciplining your kids. That was just normal. Hey,
right.
Mama's shoe coming through the kitchen and hitting you in the head. But that wasn't a spank. But I'm just saying, like, getting spanked from your parents was common. That's not even, if we met a kid growing up that didn't get spanked from his parents, we didn't trust that kid.
Right. Because it showed.
It showed. And we knew good and well we couldn't trust his parents either. Right. Like, they're a pushover. You can get whatever you want out of them. They ain't gonna do nothing to you. Right. And so people went bonkers all over spanking. And so I started observing, like, oh, snap. As much as I know the problems in the home are the issue in our culture, society, I didn't know how rooted it was into mother, father, children discipline. I didn't know it was, I knew it was bad. Like, I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad. That evangelicals are the ones that are complaining mostly about, the spanking. Like, no, we don't do that. I mean, it was largely Christians.
Do they not know what the Bible says, or do you think they have explained it away?
Yes, they know what it says, and they have explained it completely away. And they've come up with this imaginary concept of the rod didn't mean this, is metaphorical, and all these other things. And I'm thinking, like, so then there's no reason. It makes sense.
Actually, like, metaphors are less true or something,
right? Yeah, because.
And you don't want it to be a metaphor. You want that one to a metaphorical rod is much more painful than an actual rod.
You vipers, you whitewashed tombs. It's just a metaphor.
It's just a metaphor. What he actually means is, I love you. I love you very much.
Bruh, why did I think of that one? That is so, because it's less true now, because it's a metaphor.
Less true because it's a metaphor.
It didn't mean for you to do it. Yeah. I mean, if you got a wayward son, don't throw a party. It's a metaphor, people. It's a story. Yeah. When he comes back to look, don't throw a feast. It's a story.
Don't go celebrating.
Yeah.
If they comes back, just
No.
nod your head, go back to the garage and work on the car.
Yeah.
Like a good dad.
I've watched so many Christians excuse and say, no, that's one of the crazy things, like, that's abuse. I'm thinking, what's abuse is about what's to happen to you once that child grows up. Now that's going to be abuse.
Yeah.
It's abusive not to discipline your children and raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. I mean, they act like that the Bible doesn't, anyway. So all of this stuff boiling up in social media, I just was surprised, and I shouldn't be. I'm inside of politics and the culture constantly every day, but watching Christians give up basic Christian priestly duties, right? Like that's one of the things that, we've been talking about priestly duties. What's one of the things of a good a priestly duty is to lift your children up to the Lord, right?
Right.
And disciplining them.
Well, and to teach them what the real world is like. I mean, I think that's you set your home up in such a way that it's a reflection of the world they're going to find when they get there.
Come on.
And I think that's what is not happening if there's no discipline. Now, you can talk about there's different forms, there's different methods of discipline. There's all of that. Like, I think that's a worthy conversation when it's among people trying to figure out people that are going to say, and when I know what the right one is, I'm going to do it. Right. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to raise kids. And so we're discussing, what does discipline look like? What does he mean by the rod? Is that, what actually, is all of that? How does that apply in our modern day? And like, we used a flat wooden spoon. It was pretty straightforward. But the question about it really comes down to, are my children being raised in a world that reflects the one they're going to find when they leave it, so that they're wise, they're ready for it, they know how to live in the world that God made, right? That's what wisdom really is. It's skill in living in the world God made. And if your home doesn't have, if they're completely protected from pain, they're going to be unprepared for a world that smacks them constantly, because the world is a painful place to live in, and there's certain kinds of pain that you want to avoid and certain kinds of pain you want to lean into. Right. There are certain kinds of things that lead to long-term destructive pain, and there's and those things, when they're little, they should learn to avoid them from short-term non-destructive pain, right? Pain that, a sting for a moment, when you flick a kid's hand, teaches them to not touch the oven. And then if you say, "Oh, it's abuse to flick your kid's hand," he's like, "Well, no, it's abuse to not teach my kid that the oven is hot." I mean, right? It's not. It might be abuse. It might be neglect. It might, it might just be something. It just might be an oversight too. Like, I've got a scar from when I was little where I burned my hand really bad on the oven, and I remember it. I reached up, I grabbed the oven, and I had, I had lived in the home where I was really well taken care of. So that happens too. But the reality is, there are certain things in life that are like grabbing the oven. And if you don't get disciplined away from those things with short-term pain that goes away in a moment, then they're going to have to be disciplined by the world's rod, which is much more painful and much more long-lasting.
So much to say about that, because I remember they used to say in growing up, either you discipline your kids or the police will. So you decide which one you want. Right. So you teach your kids how to act in public or in society, or somebody else is going to. And that's what people don't understand about the correction system right now. Like, it's a form of parenting because other people aren't parenting.
Right.
right? Like and they've turned the civil. Well, yeah. Anyway, there's so much to talk about that. Okay, so we're supposed to be talking about marriage, but what or
Well,
no?
I was going to say, really, what the chapter is about is how to be human at home.
Oh, so we're already in it.
So we're really already talking about it.
So then the courting dance is what this chapter is. By the way, everybody's asking like somebody said, I wish you guys had show notes. We do too. We wish we had show, but we don't. So here's the book, Offering of Uncles. Is it? I can't see it's
Or
too reflected. The Romance of the Word. Okay, that one's a better. That's
well,
probably the one you could.
this one's just available, although it's out of print now too. My gosh.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. I don't
I
understand why these, but I think it's because you print 3 together and you can't print an inexpensive copy. Like all the C.S.
I
Lewis and Chesterton are both going back into print in the
singles.
single paperbacks, and that's what needs to happen again with Capon, but it's not
Well, I
public
think
domain yet.
I think what's going on is more complicated than that. I don't think that we have the wherewithal to read like we used to, and so we can
That's a
only
good
take
point.
in short pieces, and our focus is very limited. And what they need to do, I mean, if they're trying to get people to just read it and get the content in, I don't know if this changes things, is make them all audiobooks,
Yeah.
right? Like that's what they need to do. But so I opened this
I
chapter up.
wonder
I
if
had
anybody would even notice if I just recorded an audiobook and put it on Audible.
only once you started making the money, then they would
Yeah.
notice.
Then
Yeah.
they would notice.
And then I would be like, I just did this so that
Yeah.
you guys could make it happen. And so all the money is yours. I'll give you every penny I earned from it.
Yeah, it just needs to get out there.
Yeah, that's what and because I don't, I've been really, man, Jason, you kind of opened me up to this, but I've been really pondering ways to be a good priest in my house, and oblation, the lifting up. What does that really look like for each one of my kids individually? What does that look like for my wife? And then how much of when I start thinking about this, I start thinking about how much of what I have that's broken and dirty or like it's not necessarily good, but I understand something proper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I understand the idea of being a good priest. And then some of my metaphysics are broken. Some of my this is messed up. Some of my that is messed up. And so it makes it hard. It's like, well, do I wait to get all this fixed or how do I start? But I feel like I need to start lifting up and oblating right now,
Yeah.
And so there's a complication in that. And he kind of just opened this up and he showed kind of the areas that I think, well, I don't believe what I'm about to say. I still function in the reality of this nonetheless. And that's when he was talking about reductionist fallacy.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't believe. So so what is reductionist fallacy?
Well, so the reductionist fallacy is when you take a part of a thing and say this is the whole of the thing, right? And so he uses some examples like thoughts are merely electrical impulses, right? And he says there are electrical impulses in thoughts, but they're not merely electrical impulses, right? That's a reduction to what a thing is made of, so that you're no longer really describing what a thing is because you've taken so much of the substance away. So and we're always reducing things down because we can interact with something as in its whole, but we can't describe something in its wholeness because the wholeness of a thing is usually much bigger and broader than what we can describe. This is when, why you start slipping into the language of poetry when you're trying to describe something. This is why Song of Solomon is not a science text, but is a extended, a long poem, because he's trying to encapsulate the wisdom, the gaining wisdom from a wife. What does it look like to gain a wife's wisdom? Gain a woman's wisdom to you as by marrying her. So the reductionist fallacy is even the way we do our astronomy when we say the stars are merely giant balls of burning gas, right? Um, that is, we're reducing it. That's what they're made of. It's not what they are. Now, we can, as Christians, sometimes we reduce things the other way when we say something like, um, "Oh, this painful thing you're going through." Says, "Well, God means it for good." Right? We reduce it down to the just to its end purpose, and we lose. But and then you know how unsatisfying that is when somebody says that about your trial, right? They're not going to say about their own trial usually. Sometimes we do. Then when we're trying to be stoic, but that's a reductionist fallacy that says the end is the only part of the trial that is substantive. Everything else is extraneous. Um,
Oh, wow.
so the reductionist fallacy is something that we run into all of the time. In metaphysics, it's usually the materialists right now that run a reductionist fallacy.
I don't like what you just made me think about. This is okay. I like thinking about the other way. I don't like thinking about how I do it. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Oh yeah. But I think that we should always, whenever we're running into something, we should always be saying, what does it look like when I do that? Right. That's just part of, I think, the way that we grow, is by when we see, man, that guy's error is doing this. And you say, well, what are the ways that I do that? Because it draws you towards people rather than setting people up as scapegoats. And it also is a opportunity for some self-knowledge. That's not something that comes natural to me. I've had to learn that mostly through marriage.
don't we do this with everything though? Where in order for us, like you said, with poetry, we do it, but it seems like with poetry, we do it to be able to hold on to the whole of it,
Yeah.
right? But it seems like the way that way we reduce things now or deconstruct things or whatever is either to not have to hold on to it at all for what it actually is, or to only hold on to the parts that we can grab. But it seems that that's the way we reduce everything now, like the way we reduce human beings.
Yeah. And he mentions, that if you reduce them down to their chemical compound, they're worth like $1.37 or something like that. I remember those. I remember when people used to think that was a really fancy argument for atheism, but really it's just a logical fallacy. And I can do logical fallacies too. Um, that's actually not hard. It's being logical is much more difficult. Um, so you run into this, but you do run into this a lot in apologetics. When people, in Neil deGrasse Tyson, this is what makes me so angry when I listen to him. He's one of the few people that really gets under my skin. Because he just runs, it's just fallacy after fallacy after fallacy. I'm like, somebody get this guy in a logic class, or at least help him know that there's such a thing as a fallacy, because he just sits there and runs fallacy, and it's always with, well, actually, science tells us, and then he runs some fallacy, some logical fallacy. You're like, just because you can't just claim the authority of science, and say and run a lot, and that undoes the fact that you just stated a logical fallacy.
So,
Um,
would you say that science just kind of tells us what a thing does? It kind of deconstructs, but it doesn't tell us what a thing is.
I mean, right now, the way that science works is it is a purely physical, it's an empirical, meaning it's just things you can get, just information you can gather by the senses. It's an empirical investigation about what a thing is made of and its functionality, right?
Mm.
How it does things, physically speaking, so that you can then predict what a thing is going to do when you use it in a certain way, or so it's a a future facing empiricism, the way it currently functions. And if you just use it for that, it actually is a fine tool. It's just a very limited tool, right? It's like, um, a hammer is great when you find nails. If you find a hammer and what you actually have to do is, if all you have is a hammer and what you have to do is run plumbing, then you're in trouble, right? And metaphysics is plumbing and science is a hammer, right? What a thing is can't be investigated simply based on what a thing is, what a thing is for, what a thing is intended to for, and the value of a thing. All of those, you can't run science experiments to figure that out, because it's more of the of a it's a historical, so it's a backward looking instead of forward looking question. And then it is a question about the nature of things, and you don't empirically have access to the nature of things through empirical processes.
So then, is it safe to say that all final roads of metaphysics is religious? Right. You
Yes.
have to have special revelation in order to be able to have a true understanding of metaphysics.
Well, you have to have religious convictions, religious assumptions to get to metaphysics. So there are people that have that they're using religious assumptions, but they don't have special revelation. Right. And that's where that
But they
becomes an
hit and miss.
apologetic.
They hit and miss with
Yeah,
those,
yeah.
right?
That's an apologetic question, philosophical question, right? So but they are fundamentally, they're religious in the sense that they are assumptions by faith,
Right.
right? They're the assumptions that you assume, that you rest everything else on top of. There's no way to get to rationalism rationally. You first have to have a religious conviction about the trustworthiness of rationality. And it's and um and there's a couple of different definitions of religion, and there's uh the one I'm using is that it's a belief that's held by faith. It's a belief that comes prior, and is held by faith, the way that we as Christians assume the triune God comes prior to creation. Our assumption about the triune God is not something that you come to uh you come to th- I mean, you might come to it through reason, but then you discover, well, my reason was resting upon the assumption of the triune God all along, right? So you meet the triune God. You don't
Mm,
rationally assent to the triune God, right? So
mm.
it's a different sort of knowledge.
I don't know where you wanted to go because I'm sure you have your own set of notes, but I haven't even finished a whole chapter. But one thing that I was only 3 pages away. One thing that really hit me, I think, is on page 112. And he was talking about how the he didn't say this, but it seems that it's almost inescapable that we are going to oblate, right? Like that's and we're going to and we're going to oblate each other in interactions with each other, whether we intend to or not. So you're going to have interactions with other human beings, and if you're not thinking of, he didn't say this, but he made me think about it. If you're not thinking about this well, or have an understanding of what's going on, you can take moments and be a really bad priest in those moments, right?
Right.
Where the oblating is happening and you're not aware of or in control or leading the offering up, the priestly duties. It's just kind of happening on you and you're just being a bad priest. Or you can intentionally be involved in this and use those moments as a way to be a godly priest, right? And so, oh, how did he say this? He said, whether two persons come in an oblation that makes history, however, will depend on more than a common chronicle. It will depend not only on what they do to each other, but on what they do with each other, on the priestly and unpriestly offerings that they make of what that of what has happened. That is a great line.
Yeah, it really is.
I and so I was just thinking, I'm like, oh my goodness, I am missing out constantly on good priestly duties with people, right? The let's say, like you talked about car accidents earlier. Car accident. Somebody bumps my bumper, ruins my vehicle. I'm late to work. The whole nine is there. I'm so busy about what I have to do that I just want to get rid of the situation, almost like I want to get rid of my kids when they bring me their little problems,
Right.
right? Like I just need this to go away. And instead of turning into a priest at this moment and thinking about the other person, thinking about you know um, the other people that are there, and how to act like a good priest in that moment and lift this moment up to God. Like I don't think about being a priest in that way. I think about this mess needs to get away from me so I can go do what I really need to go do. But as a priest in the world, there isn't anything that's happening into the world that I shouldn't be thinking about being a good priest in those moments as.
Right.
I don't know how to think like that.
It's the
Is he getting it? Is that what he's getting at in these moments?
That's exactly it.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
So it's and it but and I think it's the question of, is this person a means to an end for me, or is this person an end as somebody made in the image of God? Is this person the am I so he says we can't treat people like watermelons. Right.
Mm,
A watermelon you can pick up, you can use, you can not use. If it sits too long and goes bad, it's no big deal. If you pick it up and slice it and eat it, it's fine. And if you drop it and it breaks, it's just a watermelon.
so the priestly
Uh,
duties of a watermelon are completely
are
different than the priestly.
completely different. Yeah, because you're dealing with another priest. Um,
Ah,
right.
ah,
And that's where the when you come across another priest, your priestly duties with other priests are different,
mm,
because you are if you're lifting up a person, you're lifting up somebody made in the image of God, right? So um, it's a little like, if you're a priest of the temple, the thing you bring to the temple to sacrifice, say 2 loaves of sourdough bread, right? You bring 2 loaves of sourdough bread to the temple. You deal with those things a particular way. You deal with the Ark of the Covenant,
mm,
because that at the heart of the temple, a completely different way,
right.
right? Well, every person that you're dealing with is an image of the thing that sits on the Ark of the Covenant.
Mm,
You're
mm.
dealing with the heart of the temple of the universe every time you're interacting with a person. They're the image of God,
Man, you better shut up.
right? So your priestly duties are pointed towards them, right? Whereas you're priesting things, not to themselves. You're priesting people to themselves. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
So what is that? Was that so priesting? I see. He talks about in the book. You take an egg, right, and
Mhm,
you oblate the egg, which means you're taking it and figuring out all the wonderful, beautiful uses of this thing. What is it, and what is it for, right? And you're
right,
figuring out that reality. And so, yeah, you
and
scramble them.
you scramble and whatever, but then you take the egg and you put it in front of your child,
Yeah,
right? The purpose of the egg is to move towards that image of God in service.
I see what you did there. Right. So the egg isn't just to figure out all the fun things the egg can do.
Right.
The egg is for another priest.
The egg is for another priest. It's to figure out all of the fun things that you can do in order to lift that up before God by putting in front of an image of God, by putting it in front of another priest. Even if that priest is your own mouth, right? Is your own self.
Well, yeah, and actually that then you start thinking about with marriage and that, because as you are well, I was with Reese, and he was talking about this. He was talking about altruism versus egoism. And it took me a minute, kind of the conversation that's been. I wish people would talk more about the things they want to say and the Christian nationalism stuff versus then about the talking points that people have given us to spout back and forth with each other.
Right.
Because I think if we actually talked about this, I know this sounds like a far way out, but I'm going to get there. Because if people talked about the things they really want to talk about and say the things they really want to say, I don't think they would come off the way that they do. Because the way that people talk is they know that they can get underneath people's skin, either talking about adoption or talking about loving your own, and all those are buzzwords that we have in order, because of the history that we've had, to make us say, oh, that person's a racist or that person's a this, and so they know they're not, but they know that those are buzzwords to catch us. And so they use them to get all the attention, but then they don't mean the things that those words convey, right?
Right.
And so, with egoism and altruism, we don't understand that seeking our best interests is actually seeking the best interests of others. And so if we go too far into, if it's only self-interest, then you're doing it wrong. That's all.
Right.
What is extra egoism? Where you are, the whole purpose is your understanding of how to love someone else well is usually is designed to understand your own self. What is it that is good for me, right? What is it that brings joy and happiness? And I seek to make sure that others can experience that same thing, right? But you have to know what that is. This is why the Bible talks about no man who loves his wife ultimately harms her, because he wouldn't harm his own self, right? There's not a separate thing here, but the definition of loving your wife well comes from how well you love yourself, right? And so those things don't have to be inward focus rivals. Exactly. Yeah. There is a lovely paradox in that. But the way that we are currently taught to think is loving oneself is bad, right? And this is kind of I think this is all culturally. I don't think this is just in Christendom. We act like loving ourselves is good, but that's the extra egotism.
Yeah.
That's not real egoism. And so, but what we do is we say, so then you got to give all this stuff to everybody, and you have to have absolutely nothing, and everything needs to be absolutely equal, right? It's like, that's the only way that everybody can truly be happy. And it's like, well, no, actually, you've been able to have your own, to develop, to work, to give, to take care of your family. All the things that are defined by loving someone else is really defined by how we love ourselves, our spouse, our kids, our family, our community, our church, our community, and so on and so forth. It expands out from there. And so when we're talking about a priestly duty, you yourself, like, it's always works back to Theonomy, self-government is the most essential part of all of this, because if you don't understand how to govern oneself, you can't understand how to then love someone else well, and so learning how to be a priest to even feed yourself is like, yeah, I need sustenance, otherwise I don't make it. If I need sustenance, they need sustenance. Okay, and I find this with food that I love. Like, I love doing smoked food, and so I'm the first person that gets to taste my food. I remember Gordon Ramsay says every good chef tastes his food first, right? Because he knows it's good and he wants people to take joy in that. He doesn't want them to tell him, oh, this isn't good. He wants to know it's good, then he wants to share that goodness. And so, I taste my barbecue and I'm like, oh, I have to let other people have this, right? Here, kids, taste this. Wife, here, taste this. And so I become a factory of joy that produces joy for the benefit of others, right?
Yeah. And that it's the same reason, you learn to get good at mixing drinks, or you learn to get good, it's not because I really want a Negroni that I make myself an amazing Negroni every night or something, right? You want to be able to say, oh, hey, I can make you this. I can make you a martini. I can make you a Negroni. It's for when people come over. If I'm drinking by myself, I just drink whiskey.
Right.
Hey, I'm not mixing anything.
Right.
it's a gift, um, to develop those skills, and to be able to, the one that I've been thinking I would really like to learn is wine pairing, because I don't
Yeah,
really know how to do it, right?
sommelier.
And yeah, exactly. Did you see that movie,
All 3 of them.
Uncorked?
Oh, yeah, I
Oh,
saw that
no.
too.
Yeah, the new sommelier, yeah, that one's on my list. What's it called? Is it
Psalm 3, I think it is. Sommelier 3, but it has just the 3 L's there. I saw a Neat. I think they did a Neat too. Can't remember if I saw
okay.
that one. That one was good. That's on bourbon. Oh,
Mm,
that one's good. That one's
right.
good.
And
Um,
but the whole purpose is so that, you know, which wine to get for your wife for the meal, which wine to get, for, the guests when they come over, which wine to order when you go to a restaurant. And like, I I feel completely unprepared in those situations. You think, well, it's a skill that would be worth learning because it's a part of the good life. Like wine, is always listed as a part of the good life all the way back, no matter which direction, no matter which history, no matter which people, no matter, which direction you go into the past. When people start talking about the good life, one of the things they always talk about is wine. And here I am without knowledge in that area. So, um, in fact, if we can find a sommelier for the, university, uh, for the
oh,
pub university, then we'll get them all
hey,
signed up for a class.
let's talk about that real quick since you brought it up. When is the class starting, and where can people go to sign up for that? Because we changed the date.
Yeah, we had to change the date, because it was slow getting people were slow getting signed up. So the new, start date is the 5th,
January 5th or December 5th.
December 5th.
Oh, cool.
December 5th. So, um, there's still time to sign up for apologetics or for, the mission of God for the family. And, you can get signed up. You get the access the day of, but also to the recordings. And yeah, it's gonna be a
This
lot
is
of fun. I
live
think
though, right? This is a
this is
live.
live, yeah.
Yeah.
When I think we just got over the number that we need for, the family one to be, you know, where it needs to be able to go for sure. And I think we just need one more sign up on apologetics for it to
Oh,
make
praise
sense
God.
to do the class. So, um,
So the family one, is
so,
this gonna be in the family one, some of this priestly stuff?
yeah, some of this priestly stuff is going to be in the family one. Let's see if I can just
Man, I'm
read.
sorry. I'm all over the place. I'm somewhat in this book. I'm somewhat out of this book. I mean, just take go. I mean, I got questions for you, but
Yeah,
feel free to
we're going to
jump
be
in.
talking about, the three spheres of Eden, and the way that God sets the original family up with Adam and Eve, and how that teaches us what our mission is now, and how to find that mission. Then we'll be talking about the covenantal and allegorical natures of the family. He talking about what the Trinity teaches us about the family, what the family teaches us about the Trinity. We're going to be talking about, the fierceness of domesticity, and how, we tend to think, we tend to set things off against one another that God has, pulled together. And so, husbanding the home and gardening the land, are thing are uh, and then raising up children to go out and conquer the wild. That's really the the family's mission, right? We take care of the home, we grow people there, we build, cultures there, we build, little cultures there, we make it into, a place where wisdom is gained and wisdom is grown. And then we go out one sphere out to the land, and we turn that into a garden, and we bring home the fruits of that garden back to the home. And then we raise up children to go out and conquer the wild and turn that into new homes, new gardens, and new children. So, talk about that. And then we'll be talking about, the what what that we're raising dragon slayers and treasure hunters. That's what children are in the Bible. Those are the things we'll be talking about, and then we're talking about heel stones, raising heel stones, raising children that are dangerous. Um, so what does it look like to think that one of the things that we're disciplining into our children is their heel stones.
Mm.
Heel stones crush the heads of serpents and dragons and tyrants throughout the Bible. And so what does it look like to raise to be willing to be the seed corn of so that our to die to ourselves to raise up children that will go off and be seed corn. And then we'll be talking about wives as dragon fire. What is it? What is submission? That is really what we're talking about there. And the what does it mean? When God brings Adam, Eve. What is really going on there? Because that's a theme throughout the whole Bible that we often miss, because I don't think we know actually what submission is. And then we'll be talking about wombs of authority. What does it mean that your wife is an Eve?
Yeah.
That your wife is what is motherhood? And then we'll be talking about sex, wisdom, and the defeat of death. Gardening the garden of your marriage, and then talk some throughout about the death and resurrection of the family too. What does it look like to have a family that is constantly dying to itself rather than becoming an idol? It's going to die one way or the other, right? Either we kill it, or Jesus specifically says that when we turn the family into an idol, that he shows up with a sword to cut it to pieces. But it's because he raises it from the dead. So what does it look like to bear Jesus's sword towards our family and make sure that we're dying and rising again as a family?
Is that a priestly duty, or is that a kingly duty, or is that a prophetic duty?
That's a prophetic duty.
The
wielding of the because there's a civic wielding of the sword that doesn't bring life, right? That brings justice. It brings life to the innocent, but there's a prophetic wielding of the sword that is, Hebrews compares it to Joshua's sword in the land, right? He comes in and the reason that Joshua's sword is used the way it is because the land is being restored. So the land has been overrun. The reason the land was overrun, though, was because the people who had the deed had been in Egypt for 280 years, or it's been 400 years since they got the deed to the land, but then they've been in Egypt long enough for other people to take over. But they had the right to the land. They had a heaven sent deed that was, so they the people that said, "Oh, you're here, welcome home," those were the people that got to stay because they were acknowledging the deed, the authority of the deed. Well, those
would that be the Moabites and Rahab, basically?
Yeah, Rahab. There's only a couple of them.
Yeah.
But Rahab, she acknowledges the deed and ends up joining the messianic line because of it, right? So
right.
So the
one for them Gentiles, though. Okay, anyway.
We were in Acts 15 in church on Sunday, so there's good. It was good stuff. But I think so in Hebrews, the sword that cuts is sharp enough to cut between spirit and bone is Joshua's sword, right? He's just finished talking about Joshua coming into the land, and then he says, "And here is the sword." We tend to think that sword it is primarily something that we take and we point it at ourselves, and it's a sword of conviction. But he's actually talking about the conquering sword of Joshua, but
Hmm.
instead of it going into the land, it's going from the land out to the world, right? It's that the word sword is a prophetic use of the sword, a prophetic use of the word as a sword, and it's one that goes out and cuts down the wilds, and so that it can be gardened. And that is the sword. That's the way the sword is to be used on our family, right? It's a cutting down of the wilds. So it's the bringing to repentance, so that restoration and resurrection can happen. So
Okay, when
that's
is
kind
this
of
class?
quick overview of the family class.
December
So
5th, right?
yeah, it starts December 5th.
And where can people go to sign up?
FLF at the FLF site, it's /university. FLF.
Oh, we gotta get that right now.
No, I gotta look it up. FLFnetwork.com /university.
FLFnetwork.com/university. Man, okay. What else was it that you wanted to talk about in courting dance?
Well, I
'Cause
think so. The section where he goes into the priestly approach to other persons, and then
yeah.
applies it to a man courting a woman.
Oh, I didn't get that far yet.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's the thing to talk about next time then, because it's
Oh no, we'll
it's
go. I want that. Tell me about this. Well,
so
it makes sense because he's talking about yeah, he talks about it must be seen in advance as an imminent oblation, and it must be shaped accordingly, talking about the fact that people themselves and relationships don't need to be looked at carelessly, but more of like, no, this is oblating thing. And so
right.
he's setting up for what people look like oblating together.
Yeah, exactly. And so he starts off by saying, what is this thing that you run into, right? Because every person is a thing also, but he talks about, that they're not an object, because they're also a subject, right? So you're not just running into an object like like a soccer ball, saying, well, what do you do with a soccer ball? Well, a soccer ball isn't a subject. It doesn't have a say over how you use it, right? Because it isn't itself having a subjective experience, but you're actually running into somebody that's having the same sort of priestly subjective experience that you are. And how you deal with that person is in a different sort of category, because the kind of thing they are is different. So he's setting that all up to then dive into a man and a woman coming together, right? And that and this is why it's so important that every man is an Adam and every woman is an Eve, right? You've got priests and priestesses, because I can't remember if I ever told the story, but when I was down in Santa Cruz, there was a big sort of evangelical pastors luncheon that happened once a month, and there were only a couple of churches that didn't ordain women. Or there's the Orthodox churches, the Roman Catholic churches, my church, and a Reformed Baptist church. Every other church in the county ordained women, and so I always tried to go out of my way to be the most polite, the most courteous to the women pastors, because everybody knew that I didn't think that she was a
They
real
were
pastor.
human.
Yeah. So
Okay.
right, that I because we were the church that didn't ordain women, and we had that reputation, and so I would go out of my way to be courteous. Well, there was a new Episcopalian woman pastor, and so I met her, introduced myself, welcome to the county, you know, and trying to say, tell me a little bit about yourself. How'd you end up here? And then I went to introduce her to someone, and I said, this is the new priestess of the Episcopalian Church. And she got really, really upset, but I wasn't trying to be insulting, but in my mind, it's not an insult to call for somebody to be a woman. She did not want to be called priestess. She wanted to be called priest. And I was like, well, but, and I tried to explain, I was like, but why, as a woman, would you want a male title? Doesn't that undermine you? I thought you were okay with women's ordination. Are you not? You have to pretend to be a man? Anyway, it did not go well. She wasn't.
I'm with her on this one. No, I'm with her on this one. I'm sorry,
No,
Jason. I'm with her on this one.
well, no, I get what she is saying. I mean, I wasn't familiar with it.
No. I think,
but I understand that she does have to pretend to be a man.
Yeah, but any woman that is going to be that office, of course, she doesn't want to be called priestess.
Well, what she said is pagans have priestesses.
Right.
And I was like, and Episcopalians.
I said priestess.
But yeah, you know, I was, but the idea that it's an insult, it's the same with actress. I don't think of it as an insult to be a woman. So why would it be a problem if somebody wants to be, if somebody wants to be called actor instead of actress? But and I get that there's history there and all that, and that I'm often
that makes more sense to me though. Like that makes more sense to me because there really is an office for an actress. That's a real office.
That's a real thing, right? Yeah. But I've called the actor an actress an actress, and they're like, well, I prefer the term actor. I was like, oh,
yeah,
it's not an actress isn't an insult. It's not like you're lesser because you're an actress. There's all sorts of roles that an actor can't play that only an actress can play.
There's some things you want to tell me about you that I don't know.
Right. But when you're dealing with people, when you're whether they're a priest or a priestess in the courting process is incredibly important, right? And so because you have different abilities between the two and different things you can and can't oblate, right? So a man can't bring new creatures into existence, right? New people, or doesn't grow people, but that's a priestly duty, right? That's something that and this is the priest and the priestess and queen and prophetess are all kind of mixed together the same way priest, king, and prophet are mixed together, that their roles kind of bleed into one another. But that kingly priest, that queenly priestessy duty of bringing new people into the world, that's a significant goal in the courtship process. But it's a goal in different ways.
I never thought about it this way. I know that, as you're talking about this, I'm just thinking about the pro-life movement, the abortion situation, everything going on in America the last 50 years. And you just made me think about one of the things that we haven't really argued a lot or very well is that the priestess duty of a woman is being robbed in abortion. We have made the argument that I think rightly so. I'm not saying this is a bad argument, but we made the argument that abortion is murder, and it is. That's a real thing. Except that we're actually ruining women too.
Yeah.
Like we've made them objects as much as we've made the child an object, and we're ruining man at the same time as well, because his kingly duty to protect his seed and his wife, like we've removed all of the priestly, kingly, every office duty of the person in the idea of abortion, so that we've made no one human in the process.
Yeah,
right?
We've become priests to gods that require human sacrifice.
Right.
And when the gods and goddesses that require human sacrifice don't stop at the children, you sacrifice your own humanity in the process.
But that's the other side of it too, is that when you do it the way that God tells you to do it, you become more human, because right? Because that's whose image you actually bear.
Yeah, there's a restoration of humanity. I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting, like when I was studying for a previous career, was studying brain chemistry and brain science. I was a tutor of kind of special needs tutor, and studying brain chemistry, brain science, and having a baby physically changes everyone in the family, right? The husband, the wife, the mom, the dad. They the birth of a baby, it does all sorts of things to the body, where all of a sudden your ability to learn new skills is like at a height, right? Because your brain says, okay, new skills to learn. It gets really soft, and you can learn a whole bunch of new things. And that's why it feels sometimes like all of a sudden I've forgotten a bunch of stuff. Well, it's just because your brain is back in learning mode, right? There's a maturation that our physical body goes through just by having a child. There's a glory that's made that comes and is made possible in this situation. And I think a lot of times we say, well, that's not something that every single person gets, and so we have to be careful talking about it. That's a good thing. In the church, we don't want the single people to feel left out, or we don't want people that aren't able to have kids to feel left out, or whatever it is. I think it's the same reason that a lot of times people can't have kids. They go and adopt one, they bring a baby home, and then all of a sudden they can have kids.
Right.
Because we are interconnected beings. Our body and our life story and our history and our relationships are all interconnected. You bring one kid home, and your body says, oh, okay, I'm going to change, and now you're going to be able to have kids. And I don't know how to explain it, but I've seen it enough times.
Yeah, I have to
know
I have to.
that it happens.
Yes.
That there's something about the glorification of the body in raising a child that is inexplicable, but is beautiful and good, and it happens. And because of our immaturity, we want everyone to look like they did when they were 19 or 20. That we've idealized that before a child is born. When really there's not an ideal body time for the body. The ideal time for everybody is the place that it is right at that moment, and that's what we should be working with and learning how to use well. That's what he means when he says courting in genre, in the wide sense, in the way of just general men with general women, can't hold a candle to courting in specie, which means that man and that woman courting is much more glorious than men in general courting women in general. Sociology has a way of gutting courtship of its glory when we try to think of men in general courting women in general, rather than just enjoying, hey, look at that little Adam going after that little Eve.
Interesting. So why?
Well, I think it's because there isn't a reflection of Adam and Eve in general.
I get it.
Right. So it's God didn't set the world up such. I mean, there are things where you're like, well, generally speaking, men are taller than women, right? That's a generalization. And maybe that tells us a little bit about Adam and Eve, but we don't experience the Garden of Eden that way. Whereas you go to the beach, you go to the lake in the middle of the summer, and you watch that boy get up the courage to go ask that girl to go get coffee, and you're experiencing the Garden of Eden, an attempt at the restoration of the Garden of Eden, an attempt at going backwards to the Garden of Eden, right? This boy feels the Garden of Eden hole within himself, and he sees that Eve and says, perhaps she is shaped the way that Garden of Eden hole is shaped. Maybe she'll fit there. And he rushes out to get her. This is, I think, something that we don't know how to do well as parents, to help our kids, work through these sorts of things, because it's a dangerous thing. I mean, it's a um, it's a learning by burning sort of situation. Like, hey, how do you pick up a candle? Well, we can tell you all day long, pick it up by that end, but sometimes you're going to reach up and grab the flame end. And when it comes to, a young guy getting up the courage to go ask a girl out, a lot of young men in our society right now are pulling out, are deciding it's not worth the trouble. And it's a bad sign, where something's really fundamentally broken when the guys won't even go ask the girls out. So something that I think as a church we need to really be paying attention and working on. And it's also something that often, the parents don't know how to help their kids through it, and they don't have good enough relationships with the other adults or young adults, 20 somethings in their church, to be able to go and say, hey, I need some help. I don't know how to work through this with my son or with my daughter. And you're closer in your memory to when, and you're closer in your experience. You're 22, my kid's 18, and you're married, but I'm 44. And how do I help my kid? Like, we don't have those relationships within the church.
Oh my
the way we
goodness.
should as well. So
Stop. Ain't nothing changed that much. Ain't nothing changed. I don't know what people talking about. Ain't nothing changed. And if it's
No,
changed, go ahead.
but the there wasn't there were no phones. There wasn't texting. There wasn't all that when I
So
was
it's gotten easier.
recording. It seems like it should have, but it hasn't worked that way.
I don't
There's something
understand.
about the distance. There's something about the availability of communication that has made it harder. But I don't know if it's I don't know if where the
Is she
where
not pretty?
the-
She must not be pretty. There's just no way. She must not be attractive. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I think we got a bunch of men that are cowards. I'm seeing
Yes.
women asking guys more than guys are asking girls.
No,
And
that's true. But the availability of communication hasn't solved that problem. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
The ease of communication isn't solving that problem. So what is it that, my kids are always telling me about, like, the way that I use punctuation in text messages is not the way they do. Right? There's a whole, like, punctuation thing
I
that
get
their
that,
generation
but
gets that I don't get, right? So whatever it is
Jason,
that's
I'm
making it more difficult.
No, man, I'm not buying it. Do you mean to tell me right now? I'm just not buying it. If you mean to tell me right now that if a young dude who was 17 years old saw a girl and happened to throw his jacket over there to her and land in her lap, and then 30 seconds later walk over and be like, hey, you got my hoodie. What's your name? That wouldn't work? I don't believe it.
No, it would totally work.
I don't
But
believe it.
Why why, when you look at marriage numbers going down, dating numbers going down, the percentage of people that consider themselves not a part of the dating pool that are single going up, how do we explain all that? There's something fundamentally moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, but I think it's the guys, right? Like, these jokers don't know how to hunt, man. They don't know how to. I mean, they just look. Okay. Oh, I might want to go through all this. Look, I guess when a man sees a beautiful woman, there isn't any limits to what he's willing to do to try and get to know her. And so I just don't believe that these guys have seen her yet. Maybe,
So
and I think there's two things. I think one of them is you're either not working hard to want to be there. So a man that's working hard to get on his game so that he doesn't have any obstacles in his way when she does come around finds himself working toward her. Right. That's one.
whether he knows her name yet, or
Whether
not,
he knows her name or not, like he's making himself available and visible easily by working hard and engaging in hard work. That's it. The second thing is, if that guy sees her, it's game over. That guy is not going to be like, I don't know what to do, or like, it's so different now. Like, you're in the same era. What do you mean it's different now?
So here is my this is not pushback.
No, please.
Because
I
the
want
reality
that
is,
smoke.
everyone that young guys that want to get married end up married. I mean,
Facts.
Facts. It is and not always. Like, there's always exceptions.
Very few.
But it's pretty slender, the exceptions. Now, the ones that don't end up married, what I have seen is they're not in a place where they can find godly girls. Now, godly girls, I've seen a lot of them not married, and they're saying, where are the godly guys? And there's two kinds of those girls that I've seen. The ones that are like, look, there's all these guys on Instagram that they're fit. They make $120,000 a year. They've got all of this stuff going for them, and they love the Lord, and here they are on Instagram. Why can't I find a guy like that? And
that's all fake, by the way.
It's all fake. Yeah,
it's
all fake. Instagram's fake. Instagram is
it's a lie.
A lie. It's like pornography or rom-coms.
Yep.
It's a big lie.
Yeah. I understand from a woman's perspective a little more than I understand from a guy's perspective.
But but you also meet guys that feel like, well, I don't meet up to that, and so I'm out of the dating pool too, because I'm not a guy. I'm not a guy that can get a girl. I don't make 120K. I don't, whatever. So I think that Instagram problem hits both sides, but it hits them differently.
And you say, I see what you're saying. So all of them are looking at this false reality of a guy, and one is a cuck, and the other one believes a lie. The guy's a cuck, right? He's like, oh, I wish I could be him because he's getting all the girls.
Right.
Yeah. And the female is like, oh, where are these guys at?
Right. Exactly. So I think
it's all fake.
But I think that the fakeness is the because you can say, well, look, there's hundreds of them on Instagram, and people forget that there's millions of people on Instagram, and you can find 100 people like that, right? So you're like, well, it's still 0.001%. The difference is there was one in my high school, right?
Okay, you might be onto something, and maybe I'm bending a little bit to this, because I think this might go back to the metaphysics that we were talking about earlier. Guys, when I was coming up in the culture that I was in, they knew something about women regardless of how much money the guy made or not, right? Guys knew that if they could talk, and if they could talk to you for just 15 seconds, they could pull you. Right. Like, that wasn't a question. It didn't matter if he had money, if I had money or whatever. Like, I just needed. And so the girls who didn't want to get pulled by those guys refused to even engage in any vocal conversation.
Right.
Like, no, he's dangerous. And so the metaphysic of what men understand about women might have completely changed a little bit, so that this new generation doesn't understand the dynamic and reality of a woman, right? Which is, and maybe some of them do, the ones that are not so good do, that, this is going back to the garden. We got to be careful of what it is we let our daughters and our wives hear and engage with. right? There is a sympathy built into them in a unique way that can allow for them to err because of the sweet conversation that they can get, right? And so there's always a protection that we need to have and training that we need to give
Yeah.
to our women, right?
But the protection has to do with getting that wisdom into them.
Right. Well, I
Right.
think
It's
that's
not
part
a-
of it.
it-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when when
That's
they're
right.
young, my girls would say, "Oh, can I have Instagram?" When they were young, it was like, "Nope, no."
Yep. Right. Right.
You
Right.
wouldn't. But there comes a point when you think you do actually have to learn how to interact with social media. And so if the wisdom isn't getting into you to the point where you can say, okay, yes, let's do this. I mean, my kids never did Snapchat, but but there's a way there is a proper use of social media, I guess you put it that way.
Yeah.
But it's something that they have to actually have the wisdom in them. It can't be an external it can't just be an external avoidance.
I guess
merely.
what I'm trying to say though about the guys is that man understood what kind of creature a woman was, so that they knew it really didn't matter all the things they had or didn't have. If they wanted to create a relationship with them, they knew that was a possibility.
Yeah.
They knew it was, and they knew how to do it. I mean, this is why guys learn to play instruments. This is why guys learn to rap. This is why guys learn to sing, became parts of bands. This is why guys learn poetry. This is why we got cars. This is why we dressed up. This is why we kept our beard shaped, our head cut. Like we did all the things because we knew our best. How can we present ourselves best to have some sort of conversation, just to get the conversation started, right? And so we knew those things. Guys don't know those things anymore. Like those are not, like, I guess
they're not,
yeah.
They're not being passed down.
Bro, I used to get a haircut every week. I was keeping my hair sharp, bruh. Like
that was the other direction, because I grew my hair down over my face because I was a punk rock kid.
Oh yeah, well then that's what you were doing. The same thing, just the other way.
But it's the same thing, just a different flock of seagulls.
Yeah.
So you got the cut short in the back and grow it down the front and the long. And we used to have a name for the guys that just joined bands to get girls. It's not a name necessarily that you want to say over the recording. Okay. But we're like, that
they
guy
still have that name. They still have that name.
Oh yeah, totally. But that guy isn't in it for the music. He's not in it he's not in it because he's really rock and roll.
None of us
He's in it for the girls. I know, we all knew that, but at the same time, some of us did also love the music. But
yeah, I mean, those two things can go together. Yeah. Right. But we knew the better we were at music, the easier it was for us to be able to talk to girls. But I just don't know. So I guess I don't think whatever the new dynamic is, I mean, you can take guys from our genre and put them in this current state of things, and they would clean up house. It's not, you know what I mean? And I think it's because of what they understood. I mean, ugly dudes. I think
it's because it was so. I run into this with all kinds of literacy, and this is just feminine literacy, right? It's the same thing. That there is if there is not social support for somebody to become literate, then it doesn't really matter what happens at school.
What do you mean? If social support for them to become literate?
So, if you have a kid, and this is a problem that I have friends that teach in public schools, elementary schools, and they'll say it doesn't really matter. Like, I can work all day on helping them learn to read, but if their parents don't read, and if there's no encouragement to read at home, it doesn't really matter, right? They'll learn to sound out words, but they'll never become literate.
Right.
And every once in a while, you have somebody that breaks that mold, but the rarity of when it happens actually proves the rule that literacy is something that comes from home, because the social support of the community, of the family, the social support of the extended family, the social support of church, all of that.
Well, that's everything. Yeah. That's
to actually grow literacy. I think it's the same with the relationships between men and women. Young men and young women don't have the social supports that we had, right? We had all the movies, the television shows, everything was, hey, it's guys trying to win women, right? And sometimes it was, a bad version of it. Sometimes it was a good version of it. But everywhere you looked, that was the at the heart of things was, let's go get a family started, right? And
Yeah.
you had perverse versions of that, like 007, some of the 007 movies, and things
Right.
where, but it was perverse versions of a good thing, right? Well, now
There isn't even a
the,
model. Yeah.
there isn't a model, right? Even perverse versions of a good thing are not there.
There's not even a
And
Cosby Family. There's nothing that's the Full House. There's none of that.
Right. And so, because even with Full House, like every single one of those guys is always trying to date a girl,
Right.
and that's a big part of the drama, is they all know that they've got this desire to be married. So, but that's gone. I mean, it's like, I remember the discussions of that when Vody was saying, Vody Bakum was talking about the gag reflex when it comes to homosexuality. There should be just a gross
Natural
out factor,
Yeah.
right? A natural gross out factor. And he said, and he said, that's really what we need. And as true as that is, right, as that would be an ideal, what do you do with a generation that doesn't have it? Right. And because that's the generation now, right? Generation that just doesn't have it. And whether it's through just the pornographic, that's
Porn's
it's
everywhere
a pornographic
now.
culture.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. It's unavoidable. It's just there. There's the numbing factor of that. There's the push, the political push every direction you look. There's there's a degrading of the natural senses that's happened. What do you do in that situation? I think it really, the church has to remember that it's been an incubator of broken institutions since the beginning, right? It's been rebuilding broken institutions since the beginning, and right now the family, I think, is the broken institution that needs to be rebuilt, and the church needs to pull the family in, incubate it, release it back into the world.
You're right. We started this whole conversation off about how I didn't notice how broken we were, right? Like I was looking around and we were talking about this with I was talking about this with my mom, and just how much the welfare system has affected not only single moms, but also the elderly, and destroyed the family because it's removed them from the equation. So now everybody's about their own freedom instead of about, how do I pass on the knowledge that I have to the next generation so that they're, and here we are back at this again, where the family, this is right back to the family. I am sitting here wondering, like, how is it that these guys, it's because even the breakdown of not having a father who was there. I had uncles, I had other men who would do things like, we would go out for dinner and there would be two young ladies over there sitting down eating at a Perkins next to us, and who would hand me a napkin and say, you're going to go over there and act like their waiter. And then you're going to go ask them if you can sit down and have dinner with them. Right. This is what you're going to go do. What do I say? This is what you're going to do. And if they say no, say thank you. And then you're going to pay for the meal and we're going to leave. It's like, okay, that worked. Right. But it wasn't what he was doing. I thought that the goal was to actually to get them. There was that goal, right? There's a goal there, right? But there was a bigger goal there, which was removing the fear for me to be able to go and talk to two young ladies who can think that I'm an absolute insane person.
Right.
But to remove that fear, develop a reflex and a muscle to be able to talk and be fast on my feet, be able to engage and not being afraid of the opposite sex.
Right.
Right. And once I learned that changed everything for me. Right. I understood what their concerns were. I understood what my concerns were, and then I could be ahead of them. But I learned all this because of someone there discipling me, right? There were some things that I learned from him that weren't good, right? but
Right.
but it in all the breakdown of the family, being left to your uncle still was a safeguard, right? In some way. And so all that is now so far gone. I'm in the middle of that generation. So you have mom and dad who are teaching their kids about their relationships and how to meet someone. And then when that breaks down, now I'm in the middle where it's like, okay, you got your uncle, right? Like Miles Morales and his uncle. It's not really the greatest influence, but
Right.
he's there.
But the kids now have YouTube, Instagram, right? And I think that is something that we don't that I don't think the church has done a good job of just saying like, hey, this is going to be tough. Let's study the problem and help them. Let's talk to them about it. Let's open up the conversation. Because I think like even Paul says that the church is supposed to be helping in this, because you meet the other people of the opposite sex at church, and Paul says, treat them like sisters and brothers and sisters, right, in all purity. The church should be a place where you learn how to talk to the opposite sex, right? You learn how to interact, and unfortunately, because of fear, and I think at the heart of it, we have not dealt with our own sexual guilt as a generation. And I think it's now multiple generations that have not dealt with their sexual guilt. We haven't taken it to the cross, been forgiven of it, walked away from it, and left it there so that we can say, okay, here, let me help you, let me walk through, let me tell you the stories of how we messed it up, so that how we messed up, so that you can learn that wisdom of that shipwreck. And we haven't done that, and because of that, we're sort of leaving a generation to itself to figure it out on TikTok, and that I do really think that's a difficult that our kids are working through a difficult thing. They're in a hard situation.
You've made it sound like that we're leaving our kids to figure out relationships and sex by themselves,
with each other, but not
right, not with us.
Yeah. And I mean, this is it should be an open conversation in our homes, right? And by conversation, I mean, like, we actually listen to our kids talk about it. Hey, this is I met this boy. I really like him. Why do you like him?
What's his name and his address?
Right? What things about him do you like? What are some things that you see that concern you? Right? What are things that you would think he would need to grow up a lot here or here to be able to be ready for marriage? What do you see? Right? And help our kids learn to ask those questions, right? What we do is we tamp it down and say, nope, 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 nope. Don't go that direction. You can get burned by that fire. Right? And that's true. And our kids might end up burned by that fire and hurt in situations and things. And but we need to help them work through how to learn to be attracted to the right things, right? And that means that there has to be an open conversation. If they're going to bring something up and then they're just going to get made fun of over and over for having a crush,
you're being a bad priest.
Yeah, they're never gonna bring it to you again.
Yeah,
right. They'll bring it to someone, but it won't be to you, or maybe they won't bring it to anyone, and they'll. But a lot of this is because we don't believe that we could help them, because we know we messed up. That's a whole you look at there is I think there is a good use of sociology. I know he talks about the problems with it, but you look at the numbers of abortions, the numbers of divorces, the numbers of people raised in single family homes.
There's another
And
story going on there.
yeah, that there's this big cultural story and that's going on, and that we are affected by, even if we were raised in a family where there wasn't divorce, raised in the broader cultural influence is something. I mean, we are connected to our cities, to our neighborhoods, to our nation, to our state, right? There's a real covenant connection. And so us working through those things with our kids is a blessing, not just to us, but it's a blessing to the broader to our broader people as well.
All right, so next
but
time,
it is hard because who wants to, it's
I just want to like stop it. This is not that hard. You know what I mean? Like I just maybe, and this is where I'm not being a good priest either. I just like this is, really.
Here's what I think, that I think we do this as adults and as parents. Teenagers, their world is pretty small. So when they have a problem,
it's the whole world.
It's their whole world, right? And we think if we had that problem, it would be so small compared to how big our world is, right? It wouldn't fill up very much of our world, but it still fills up their whole world.
I don't know. Have you seen social media?
Take them seriously, help them work through that problem, which is small but fills a lot of their world. Then when their world is bigger and they run into bigger problems, they will have gained the wisdom they're supposed to gain from that problem, that issue.
Jason, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier when with the discipling of your kids. When they bring you something, says they stole this from me, like that's their whole world.
That's their whole world.
That's it. And we're saying your world doesn't matter. Go back over there and figure it out, whatever. Yeah. And so we create the kind of people who are going to have, their whole world is always that one thing is going to ruin their whole world because we haven't showed them how to have wisdom with that thing or that area. So it really does start
deal with the problem and put it behind them. And
and the right conflict resolution, but we haven't. So then by the time they become teenagers, we've already trained them to believe that this is the whole world. Right. And so we've discipled them in one way already. Okay, man, we can talk. There's so much to talk about with this, and it's so connected to priesthood. Next time we're going to walk into the marriage stuff in more detail. Is that what you want to do?
Well, I mean, I would love to just finish the courting and then talk about the next chapter, which is the historicity of marriage. So working through marriage and children.
So 113 to 121, and then the historic.
The historic bind is.
I like historic better. Historic. Okay, we can do that. I love this. This is man. The approach of man to man is precisely a dance, an according dance at that. None of my meetings with another man is a mere event, either in his life or mine. Every introduction is an invitation into an other's meaning, a terrible opening of one history to another. In friendship, love, or alliance, we enter inexorably exchanges, rendering death and forever at each breathing. Dude.
He's such a good writer.
Dude. But that's the thing, like, man, I got to take that seriously. And when this is, as we were talking about this, I was thinking, this makes it a lot easier to evangelize people as well. Mm-hmm. Because when you come in contact with another person and you know that they're supposed to be a priest, it's easy for you to work through how they should be acting. And since you know you're a priest, you know how you should be acting, and then you know how to engage a situation properly between priests.
Right.
And so then you what does the Bible say when you find a brother in fault? Like, who is spiritual, right?
Correct
Restore him
with all gentleness.
Yes. Right. And so it makes you think differently about how to engage every single situation, knowing that your job is oblation as a priest,
Right.
right? And so, anyway, there's so much to say on that. You got last words, or
I mean, I just think that this is that when things are when things are broken at the metaphysical level, right? You got to dig all the way down to the metaphysical concrete in order to put them right, and that's where I think that's where we are as a people and in the church, and that just it can be a joy to do that, or it can be a frustration. How come I didn't get taught? How come I'm in this spot? And we get upset at the previous generations. I see a lot of that online right now. I think the whole OK Boomer movement is just frustration at the previous generation for letting things go so long while broken. It's like, you knew we had a broken leg. Why did you let us run a marathon? I don't understand. I can't. It'll never heal, right? And
but they're not doing any better than their predecessors,
right? Well, and I think that's why we have to start thinking about. We got to start thinking like historical creatures and say, okay, let's change course. And the same way that their course led to this spot, the previous generation, what course do I want where do I want the next generation to go? Which direction do I want them to go? And us changing course, sometimes it helps us directly, quickly, but it really helps the next generation to dig down to the metaphysical concrete, put the foundation right, and really take a long-term directional view on these things, and not think, how do I get what I want out of my marriage quicker? And think, how can my grandkids' marriage be affected by the way I change course right now?